Hello again, this is another video from British English Coach in the Master Polite English course. So, in this video, we're going to talk about how to express preference. So, as always, let's start with a definition. So, I'm sure you know this one, but a preference is when you like one thing more than another. So remember, it comes from the verb to prefer. I prefer cheese to butter, for example. And the noun is preference. My preference is for cheese rather than butter. So, preferences. Now, imagine you're in the following situation. You have been invited as a guest to somebody's house, or maybe their office, for a meeting. So you're offered a drink by the host. So the host is the person who invites you. Now, you might be thinking, how can you offend someone or upset somebody in this situation? Well, you can if one option is more of a problem for the host, for the person offering it, than the other option. For example, if you are at a house with lots of other guests and everybody around you wants to drink tea and you'd prefer coffee, well, your host might feel a little put out. To feel put out is to feel offended or annoyed about somebody or something. Okay, so you have to be quite polite when you talk about preferences as well. So in this example, do you take tea or coffee? Now, it's very common in English to actually say, do you take tea or coffee in a slightly formal situation, a more formal situation where someone is offering you a drink. Okay, now, like most people, maybe you drink tea and coffee, but you probably prefer one to the other, or it depends on the time of the day and the situation. So let's look at some phrases you can use to express preference. Here goes. Again, I'm going to repeat them twice. And you might want to repeat after each one. Well, tea is fine, but I'd rather have a coffee if that's not too much bother. Well, tea is fine, but I'd rather have a coffee if that's not too much bother. Bother means the same as trouble or problems. If it's not too much to ask, could I have a tea? If it's not too much to ask, could I have a tea? I hope you don't think I'm fussy, but I'd actually prefer a tea. I hope you don't think I'm fussy, but I'd actually prefer a tea. And of course, there are some other phrases, such as, on the whole, I prefer coffee, but a tea would also be fine. On the whole, I prefer coffee, but a tea would also be fine. Whichever is easiest for you. But if I have to choose, a tea would be lovely, thanks. Whichever is easiest for you. But if I have to choose, a tea would be lovely, thanks. Actually, I could really do with a coffee right now. Actually, I could really do with a coffee right now. Now, you may have noticed that in some of these preference phrases, you decide on one option. And in others, you say that both options are fine, but maybe you'd prefer one. So you have to really judge the situation. So now it's your turn. Let's practice with some other situations. So how would you express preferences in these three situations? Situation one, new computer. Your boss has agreed to provide you with a new computer. Would you prefer a PC or a Mac? Okay, now this is a great situation to be in. You have a choice of a PC or a Mac, but you still have to express a preference. Next one, situation two, window or aisle seat. Now, the aisle is the part of a plane where the flight attendants walk up and down. In the middle, it's like a corridor. So you and your colleague are flying to a conference in another city. Which seat would you prefer? The window seat or the aisle seat? Okay. We could also use it for trains or buses. And finally, Italian or Chinese. You're going on a romantic date with a potential new boyfriend or new girlfriend. You're quite excited, but maybe a little nervous. And your date has a choice of two options. Where would you like to go for dinner? Italian or Chinese? Okay, so again, think of possible responses you could give in these situations. So, think what you would say, and then afterwards you can listen to the audio. Now, remember, these are just my suggestions. There are lots and lots of possible answers. And if you're not sure about what I say in the suggestions, you can check with the script. Okay, so again, as always, you can do some shadow speaking. So while I'm saying these possible options, you can just repeat. Try to copy my stress and my intonation. Keep on doing it until you maybe can repeat the whole sentence by yourself. So, situation 1, new computer. Your boss has agreed to provide you with a new computer. Lucky person. Would you prefer a PC or a Mac? You could say, well, a PC would be fine, but I think I'd rather have a Mac, if that's not too much bother. Well, a PC would be fine, but I think I'd much rather have a Mac, if that's not too much bother. Or, whichever is most economical for you. But if I have to choose, a Mac would be ideal, thanks. Whichever is most economical for you. But if I have to choose, a Mac would be ideal, thanks. Situation 2, window or aisle seat. You and your colleague are flying to a conference. Which seat would you prefer? I hope you don't think I'm fussy, but I'd actually prefer a window seat. I'd like to see the city as we arrive. I hope you don't think I'm fussy, but I'd actually prefer a window seat. I'd like to see the city as we arrive. Or possibly, actually, I've got long legs, so I could do with an aisle seat, actually. Actually, I've got long legs, so I could do with an aisle seat. You don't have to say actually both times, but actually generally makes your language a bit more polite. And finally, situation 3, Italian or Chinese. You're going on a romantic date. Where would you like to go for dinner? I hope you don't think I'm fussy, but I'd actually prefer Chinese food. I had Italian last night. Or, on the whole, I prefer Italian food, but if you'd prefer Chinese, that would be fine too. Just going to repeat the first one. I hope you don't think I'm fussy, but I'd actually prefer Chinese food. I had Italian food last night. Okay, so it's very common when we express a preference to give a justification, a reason for our answer, for our preference. Okay, it makes the other person maybe understand why we prefer one thing to another. Okay, so again, if you had other options, that's absolutely fine. So, all I can say again is just practice and write down the phrases, try to remember them, repeat them over and over again in different situations. And when you're happy that you've remembered them and you can use them more or less automatically, you can move on to the next lesson. So I'll see you soon. Bye for now.